Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sahil Sandhu, and next to me I have Timothy Choi.
Today we'll be talking about the Russian Revolution and how it changed Russia forever.
More specifically, we're going to be talking about the novel George Orwell created and how it relates to the Russian Revolution.
Russia suffered greatly under the Tsar regime. Food was scarce and the overall conditions for the working class were difficult. Treated like animals, peasants were given very little pay for their deeds. Change was needed, and with the aid of riots, the Tsar regime collapsed and uprose the provisional government. With the people blaming the government for their misfortunes, Vladimir Lenin saw it as an opportunity to take full control of the country. The Bolshevik Revolution came to an end, and Lenin's vision came into fruition. The founding of communism, the expulsion of Trotsky, and a major industrial revolution completely changed the country of Russia. The novel Animal Farm by George Orwell reflects these major events. Through the help of characters like Napoleon and Snowball, as well as clever symbols like the windmill, Orwell retells the story of the Russian Revolution in a way that everyone can understand. Marxist teachings spread rapidly through Russia in the early 1900s. This started with Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Published in 1867, the Marxist Manifesto talked about the workmen taking over the means of production, including property, raw materials, factory, homes, and so on. Marx also wrote about all people being equal and not owning any private property. This is reflected in Animal Farm, as Old Major represents Karl Marx. The book opens with Old Major preaching to the animals about communism. The animals of the farm learn that they will be happier and better off producing for themselves rather than for someone else. All their hard work will benefit themselves. After learning these principles, change is made on the farm. Similarly, after the spreading of communist principles, the people take action, and change from the old ways in Russia are finally over.
In Animal Farm, Snowball is run off by Napoleon's dogs, which he bred secretly by himself. This is Orwell's way of talking about how Joseph Stalin banished Leon Trotsky from Russia. After the death of Vladimir Lenin in 1926, Stalin and Trotsky fought for power of the Bolshevik government. Both leaders were well respected and had their own followings, which resulted in two groups. Stalin appeared to be moderate. This group was very patient in building a communist state, but Stalin pretended to be a moderate only to defeat his rivals for power. Trotsky was a part of the left opposition, which wanted complete communism right away and needed heavy industry to go at a faster pace. Trotsky and Stalin almost never agreed on matters. The tensions is exemplified in the book as Snowball and Napoleon each have their own followings. They also have their own ideas and disagree with each other. An example of this is when Snowball first proposes the idea of building a windmill on the farm to generate power. Napoleon disagrees and states that the animals' main focus should be an increased food production, and if they wasted their time on the windmill, they would starve to death. At a meeting where the construction of the windmill was to be voted on, Snowball's eloquent speech had carried away all the animals, and there was no doubt which way the vote would go. It was at this moment when Napoleon ordered his dogs to attack Snowball and drive him off the farm. Similar in the 20th century Russia, Stalin won control of the party and Trotsky was removed from the party. The next year he was banished from the country. One of the biggest events that took place in Russia in the late 1920s was the attempt to completely overhaul the Russian industry. To help modernize Russia, Stalin implemented the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan was a list of economic goals made by the government to help improve Russia's underdeveloped industry. The list included a command economy, collectivization, and heavy industry. Industrialization would now be forced instead of guided. The novel Animal Farm by George Orwell is able to reveal the 5-year plan in the form of the construction of the windmill. Similar to the 5-year plan, construction of the windmill was set in motion because Snowball believed it would substantially decrease the workload of the citizens, making them only work 3 times a week, ultimately making life easier for all the animals on the farm. Yet this was not the case. The harsh and unrealistic timeline for both the 5-year plan and the making of the windmill was proving to make life even more difficult as resources were put in to improving the economy rather than improving the poor living standard. Many animals expressed their dissatisfaction with Napoleon via protest, however they were quickly silenced. The hens, for example, refused to give up their eggs when Napoleon demanded more. Napoleon acted ruthlessly by cutting off the rations of the hens. The hens held out for 5 days, but ultimately gave up as 5 of them died. Like the hens, many peasants protested against collectivization by destroying the crops, starving themselves rather than fulfilling the government's plans. At first, both dictators initially started their plans to aid in the improvement of their societies. However, they quickly became consumed more with the thirst for power and influence rather than what was right for their people. At the end of the First World War, Russia was in ruins with its depleted economy and outdated industry. The working class was furious and started the first of many riots, with communism prevailing at the end. Through the use of Animal Farm, George Orwell is able to represent the events which occurred around 100 years ago.
With Old Major's purpose in the novel to act like Karl Marx and preach communism, the feud between Stalinism and Trotskyism are shown through characters like Snowball and Napoleon, and the force of industrialization is exhibited by the making of the windmill. George Orwell is able to retell the long and many-sided story of the Russian Revolution in just a short 100-page novel, which simplifies and touches on the most crucial events that took place, proving that the novel Animal Farm is an allegory for 20th century Russia.
This concludes our video on how the novel Animal Farm is an accurate representation of the Russian Revolution. I hope you enjoyed our video, and make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next video about World War II, and more specifically, Hitler.